So the two widows today figure prominently in our reading. The widow of Zarephath from the first reading, and the widow who puts in the two coins at the temple witnessed by Jesus. Going back to that widow of Zarephath, we have to put it in the context of the prophet Elijah who comes to see her. See, the prophet Elijah was having difficulties convincing the people to turn back to God because so many of them had followed the lead of their king and their queen, Ahab and Jezebel, to go off and worship these pagan idols, especially the pagan idol of Baal. In fact, there were so many priests and prophets related to that particular cult that Elijah almost found himself alone. And yet he was faithful to God and listened to what God had to say to him. He had just come from the desert where the Lord was feeding him with ravens who had brought him food. But now the drought that had come, the famine that had beset the land as a result of, in a sense, a curse that he had put on them because of their unfaithfulness, now is starting to become very close to home. So God says to him, go to this widow in Zarephath, and she will take care of you. So he meets up with her. Now she is not a Jew, she is a pagan, Syro-Phoenician by birth. And so she says to him, well, holy man, yes, that's true. You could probably get something from me if I had something to give you. All I have left is what I'm going to cook for my son and myself, and then we're going to die because there's nothing left. His prophecy to her is trusted by her. Here she's a non-believer, and she trusts in the word of this holy man who comes. She goes and makes him that little piece of bread or cake, as it's called, and then the jug of oil does not run dry, and the flour does not deplete during the entire time of the drought. The trust of this poor old woman, who was a widow, dependent upon her son. Doesn't say how old the son was. Now puts her faith in the words of the prophet. Those with little have a tendency to be more generous than those who have a lot. Mother Teresa, when she was working with the poor in India, would often say, if you give what you don't need, it's not giving. In other words, if there's no sacrifice to it, then there really is no gift. It's just the extra. So often, we Catholics, I think, really think about our generosity in terms of what's left over, rather than giving out of our need. And that's what the gospel is speaking to us today clearly about the woman who puts in the 2 coins. Mother Teresa said that there was a beggar one time that came to her and said, you know, everybody is giving you things. I want to give you something too. And she recognized the beggar who he was. He had 30 rupees. He had 15 rupees, which is like 30 cents. He says, I want to give this to you. She knew that if he gave that to her, and she received it from him, he would have nothing to buy food that day. But she knew also that if she didn't receive it from him, she would hurt his feelings deeply because of his desire to want to help the poor, helping the poor. And so she received the money from him, and just the greatest smile came over his face. His desire to do that was fulfilled. He felt fulfilled in doing that, giving out of his need. She said in her reflections that that gift from him was more important to her than the Nobel Peace Prize that she had won. Jesus in the gospel sits opposite the treasury, which is the collection box, basically, of the temple. There were 13 trumpet kind of shaped collection boxes, and people could throw their money in. And money in those days was coins, it wasn't paper. And so people could hear those coins hit those trumpet-shaped boxes. And you could tell what was being thrown in by the sun. For a gold coin would certainly make a different sound than a cheap little tiny penny. And so here comes all these people with their donations and with their temple tax, and they would put it in. And he noticed the rich coming because they were dressed that way. And they would put in their coins. He knew that it was a lot of money going in. And he also heard that the widows came and threw in the two what are referred to as leptons. They are like 2 pennies. And then he makes a statement. He says that she has given more than all of the others. Research tells us that the poor are more generous than the wealthy. In the research that philanthropic organizations do on giving in the United States, it seems the trend is about the same as it's been going along. In fact, Massachusetts, as an example, is the fourth highest state in terms of personal income, fourth highest state in the nation in terms of personal income. They rank last in terms of the amount of charitable giving, in terms of a percentage of their wealth. New Hampshire was 6th overall in income in the United States. They ranked 45th in terms of percentage of income given to the poor. On the other end of the extreme, there's Mississippi, which is 49th, poorest state in the Union, gave 6th in terms of percentage of income. And I found it interesting that in more recent statistics, Utah is the top giver at 6.6% of their income to the poor. It seems the Mormons are doing much better than us. The theme is what Jesus says. It's very true. The widow's mite insight that Jesus had is mostly correct. So what does this mean for us? First of all, there's a spiritual part. And the spiritual part of it has to do with Jesus' gift to us. What is his gift to us? Is it the leftover type of thing? No, it's not. It's his entire life. That's what he chose to give. He gave himself for us. So he, in a sense, sees himself symbolically talked about in or witnessed or symbolized in the gift of the widow with her 2 pennies. You know, widows in our parish are usually the unsung heroes of our spiritual lives. They're the ones who are many times most generous and most apologetic in terms of not being able to give enough. Even the little means that they have, oftentimes, they will give from that. If widows are surrounded by their kids, they find support and they find security. But how difficult it is sometimes for a widow who's experienced financial difficulties throughout her lifetime, then without a husband finds herself even more scared about the future. They suffer silently in our midst. Widows are frequently the spiritual backbone of the parish. They're the ones who are doing the praying, much more than the rest of us who work. They are, in a sense, the ones where loneliness drives them to connect themselves more to God and to the church. So Jesus contrasts the generosity of this woman who gives those 2 pennies with the greed that he also sees around him in that temple experience. And because he identifies that to the scribes and the Pharisees and to the Sadducees, he earns their contempt, because they're the ones that seem to have the power and the money, and he's criticizing them. Priests often get associated with asking for money. Pastors in parishes, whenever they give any kind of talk related to money, they bring out all sorts of interesting comments. One of which is, Father is always asking for money. Father is not always asking for money, but because Father asks for money once, Father therefore is asking for money all the time. And so that's what happens when you start rattling this little value business about what our money goes for and how important it is to us. In a sense, I've always said, and it's always true, and you know it to be true, that if everybody in Paris gave 3% of their income to the church and to charity, we would never be asking for it ever. One of the painful things for me when it comes to dealing with money, and after 35 years of priesthood, I'm kind of getting tired of it. I'm usually pretty good at it. I usually can deal with that stuff pretty well. But after 35 years, I'm kind of getting tired of it. I'm tired of the fact that whenever there is a need identified, and it is a need that is authentic, and then we create an effort to try to meet that need. As an example, the campaign we're going through right now with Cedar in terms of paying off the debt from the remodeling. minute you identify that, the minute you bring that out, it also brings out every single one of the hurts that have ever happened in people's lives caused by the church over the past century. Nobody lets go of anything. Nobody lets go of anything. It gets so frustrating sometimes. The widow tells us something very important about our attitude. What she does is she simply gives what she can, and even more so out of her need. It's not much, but it's her gift. Well, there was a letter that I got years ago when I was doing my pastorate in Norfolk. We were building a new church. And there was a letter I got from a poor widow. And I knew her well. I mean, she was a great lady, kind of like our widows here, always in church and praying and all that sort of thing. And she said her gift, and I don't know what it was, it was $20 or $50. It wasn't much on the scheme of things. But she says, I wish I could give more. I really, really wish I could give more. But maybe it's enough to buy a bucket of nails. I just remember that image, the bucket of nails. Now, I didn't go back to her and say, I'm sorry, but we don't use nails anymore to build things. But anyway, that whole idea was just such a neat touch to my heart. It was that experience that Jesus had with the widow there in that temple area. She did what she could do, and she gave out of her need. So I take a little detour right now because I just want to kind of finish up on something that we've been doing the past 2 to 3 months, whatever it is. We've been advertising these estate planning seminars. And we've had the last one now, took place in Fordyce the other day. We had a nice church, about 110 people or so from our parishes attended them. And they were good informational things about taking care of ourselves and taking care of our assets and making sure things are well planned for the day that hopefully someone will like us enough to bring a picture and put it on the table over here. So there'll become a time when that happens. And before that, we hope that we have prepared our estate, in other words, what is left of us when we die, so that the people that are left don't have to fight over it, don't have to worry about it. It's clearly laid out what we want to have happen to it. And so that planning is so important. Now, we don't like to do that because it means to us, I'm going to die. I don't like that idea. And so I kind of resist it. And I don't deal with it. And I let it go. And so I guess one of the things that is true about all this estate planning is that if you don't have a will, there's one already been written for you. The state of Nebraska has one on file already for you. It's a very nice little law from that. And I guarantee you, you do not like that will. So have one for yourself where you define what exactly you want to have happen with your the remainder of what's left of you after you die. Talk to a good lawyer, visit with them who knows you and knows your assets and knows what's all about, so that they can help you make good decisions that relates to the taxes and inheritance, and et cetera, et cetera. Because what you want, those of you who are moms and dads, what you want in the end is that your kids are taken care of if they're minors, or secondly, that the kids get along if they're adults after it's all over. The last thing with respect to this funeral planning, this estate planning, is planning your funeral. Get that business taken care of. If you're over 60 years old, that's good to do that. Just go talk to your funeral director and get your funeral taken care of. That's one last thing I still need to do with my estate plan. However, I do have some of the details already laid out. For instance, I wrote down very clearly, I wanted chicken at my funeral dinner. So, you can get really specific with this stuff, okay? So, take care of that stuff. It's a way for you to keep peace in the family, keep peace in your life, and just to kind of get settled. I know what's happening. There's a saying that says, we only bring to heaven those things that we have given away. And it goes along with my wonderful phrase that I've repeated many times, there are no purses pulling U-Hauls. So we just have to make sure that what we do with what the Lord has given us has an attitude attached to it that says detachment, that it's really not mine. I'm caretaking it, and I want to use it for the benefit of those that I love. The widow brought the greatest gift in Jesus' mind, and she did because it came out of her need, and it came out of that trust that she had in God, as evidenced by the first widow, the widow of Zarephath. Let's pray that the Lord would always keep us in mind